So tool watches are often debated whether or not they're even a concept nowadays. On one side, you have people that are very passionate, think about the maybe previous days where a watch was a necessary tool for the day-to-day, but also for professional use cases. Then on the other side, you have people that are debating whether the concept is completely meaningless to begin with, and should we even be talking about the idea of a tool watch altogether. But if we are going to accept tool watches as a thing, what I think we would say to define them are they are watches that tend to be designed to deliver key attributes that allow them to be capable of assisting a wearer with a task for professional applications. Of course, there are other ways to classify a tool watch, but this to me feels like the most on-the-nose definition of where most people go when classifying these. And since tool watches are geared towards specific intended purposes, delivering sensible elements of wearability in the everyday outside of these said professional use cases can sometimes be an afterthought. But what if you could have both? A watch suitable for more extreme jobs while also being able to look the part in everyday circumstances. In this video, we look at a list of tool watches that can handle professional situations while still looking great in nearly every scenario. So we just went live with several holiday promotions on teddybaldessar.com. Now, some of these promotions are only going to last for a limited time, so if you are in the market for a new watch, you're gonna wanna check these out very soon. Promos include a free marathon watch with select purchases from the brand, gift with purchases from brands like Longines, Glasuto Unimatic, Mito, Oris. We also have discounts on straps, and also a complimentary gift card added to your order with select purchases. Now, these are only active for a limited time, so act fast before you miss out, and also check out the link in the description down below for a full breakdown. It's a page that will have all of these holiday season offers in one place so you can know more. As always, thank you guys so much for the support, and happy holidays to all of you watching. So how this video is going to work, we have 4 different categories that we're going to be looking at, basically reverse engineering around these professional use cases. One category is going to be the indoors or engineering environments where you're going to be in close proximity to large machinery or equipment. Then you have the aquatics, so think about dive scenarios or watches that need to have a lot of water resistance. Move to air, pretty self-explanatory. And then we also have land or in the field style of watches. Each of these 4 categories will have a sub $1,000 option, a $1,000 to $4,000 option, and then a stretch pick to $5,000 and above. Given the nature of a tool watch, you don't want the watch to be so expensive where it defeats the intended purpose. So we're going to avoid ultra high-end pieces unless they demonstrate the value traits one might look for in these professional environments. Also, we're going to be avoiding watches that might be capable of the task, but will compromise versatility. So sorry, Omega Ploprof and Sinn U50. Now for our first category, we have the great indoors. That's what we're going to call this category. This is engineering watches, watches that are going to be in close proximity to larger machinery. You might have magnets nearby. So what are we looking for? We're looking for accuracy, legibility, water resistance, and magnetic protection will be vital. So I know I said that I want to keep everything under $1,000. This is right at that cutoff point. If you go for the strap, it's about right under. If you go on a bracelet, it is going to be more expensive. I want to acknowledge that. But I really struggled in thinking of a watch that has magnetic resistance under $1,000 that can match that of this watch. Here we have the Circula Pro Trail. The reason I wanted to include this watch is it does a few things that allow it to separate from some of the competition. Now, number one, we talked about magnetic resistance. This is going to have resistance to 1000 Gauss. It also has a soft iron cage. I could not think of many other watches with this level of magnetic resistance under $1,000 or right around $1,000. If you're not familiar with Circula, they're a German brand, family owned and operated. It's multi-generational family operation here, going back to 1955. In addition to the magnetic resistance, you're also getting a Labore grade SW200. Superluminova is very solid. And then also you have the hardness of the case itself. 1200 HV on the Vickers hardness scale. Untreated stainless steel in that range of 150 to 200 Vickers. So this is substantially more scratch resistant than your just run-of-the-mill stainless steel watch. And beyond that, you're getting some good specifications. 150 meters of water resistance, pretty wearable case at 40 millimeters, but getting a 46 millimeter lug to lug, 12 millimeters in thickness, and a watch that I do think would look good in a variety of environments. It is tool appropriate for the task here, but also isn't going to go so far in this direction where it's not going to look good. Say you find yourself in a boardroom meeting or something of that sort where it's gonna look out of place. So now we jump up to the next tier in this great indoors section, and we're going to look at Ball Watch Company with the Engineer 3 Marvelight COSC edition. Now you have a few different options within the Ball Engineer family. This specific one is also going to have a higher magnetic resistance compared to some of the entry-level models from this collection. We're also getting a 1000 Gauss rating on this watch, which is going to highly outperform that ISO 764 standard for magnetism. Also, this is going to be a COSC certified movement, so -4 to +6 seconds a day is going to be tested and certified. These are shock tested movements as well, and I like the incorporation of tritium in this instance. Tritium, I think we always hear about being this interesting material. It has this tactical feel, but the reality is if you've ever had a tritium watch just sitting in complete darkness, maybe you had it on your bedstand at night, or even maybe in the field specifically, if things get completely dark, tritium is just objectively a better tool for that individual environment because it's going to be constant illuminating. You do not need to be worrying about charging it. And when you get into complete darkness, you start to see the benefits of this, where Superluminova is going to have this dramatic fall off after several minutes being in this dark environment. In terms of the watch itself, 40 millimeters in diameter, thickness of 12.5 millimeters, lug to lug of 46.6 millimeters, and 100 meters of water resistance. Now for the final watch in this first category, I was going back and forth. What is an engineer's watch? You have magnetic resistance, water resistance. We're checking off all those boxes. You have something like the Milgauss that can be considered here, but that's been discontinued, so that didn't feel right to mention in this video. Then you had the Ingenieur from IWC. You have the history as that engineer's watch, but given the current representation of that collection and where it sits in price, and also with some of the specification on offer there, I think the watch we're gonna be looking at here is probably going to be a better choice. Here we have the Omega Aqua Terra. I'm gonna specifically look at the teakwood dial. So zooming out just for a moment, now the Aqua Terra family has been around for over 20 years to this point, falls underneath the Seamaster family, but where I wanna draw our attention to is 2013. So 2013 was a precursor to what we were going to see a couple years later with the Master Chronometer, where Omega was truly pushing forward this magnetic resistance. There was an Aqua Terra known as the Bumblebee, and it looked exactly how you would expect, but this was a watch that was capable of that 15,000 Gauss rating that became part of that Master Chronometer certification. So in other words, the Aqua Terra was the watch in the 21st century to push forward this magnetic resistance from Omega, a characteristic of the brand now that I would say is most commonly associated with them. Now, where you look at that 2013 release and look at the modern package, you'd look at the teakwood dials. For me, it feels more appropriate to fitting the mold of what we're talking about here compared to something like the lacquer or the shades editions. What we're specifically highlighting here is that green dial. I love the way this one looks. I'm gonna focus mostly on the 41. You get the 8900 movement, which does have several benefits, one being the power reserve, but also the dual barrels of that movement and how that's going to affect the constant flow of energy down the gear train to the oscillating balance wheel. 13.2 millimeters in thickness, lug to lug of 47.5 millimeters, still getting 150 meters of water resistance in the process. Another thing that I'll bring up about the Aqua Terra family is I think it has some of the best AR treatment in the industry. Now it's a double AR, but if you look at this from any angle, reflections, going to absolutely kill those. You're never going to have to worry about that. Some might bring up the aspect that this could scratch on the outside. I have not had that issue, and I would rather the ability to see the watch, all the detail, compared to having this concern that something's going to scratch. Also, lume is pretty solid, and where it sits in price, I think it's a perfect engineer style watch if you do want to have this stretch element. Now we're gonna look at the water category, or the diving category, probably is going to be the most appropriate way to classify this. So this is maybe the most common and beloved genre of tool watches. When people think of the romantic idea of connecting tools with watches, intended purpose, I think many people jump to this whole arena of watches. Dive watches are often overblown and perceived to need much more than what is necessary. In this case, what we're looking for here is ideally ISO compliance. You want legibility, water resistance, easy to also track elapsed time as well. Now the first watch, we're gonna look under $1,000, gonna take a look at Seiko. I would say for ISO compliant dive watches, there's two leaders here under $1,000 that people will commonly mention, and they come from Japan, Citizen or Seiko. I wanna show something new here. This is the new Seiko Samurai, looking at the SRPL13. This is the black dial version. You also have a very cool red dial version that was just released this year. What you're getting new with these watches is an updated case diameter of 41.7 millimeters, thickness is 12.3 millimeters, lug to lug of 49.5 millimeters. So a little bit different compared to what we typically expect from Seiko dive watches, where that lug to lug is going to be compact for that diameter. In this case, where it's pretty true to size. 200 meters of water resistance. This is an ISO compliant dive watch in the process. 4R35 movement. You are getting Hardlex mineral glass on the front. The watch also is going to have fantastic lume. I would say some of the best lume that you're going to find in the business, regardless of price, honestly. Probably the biggest update with these designs outside of the case is going to be the sword hands and how they've been tapered and redesigned to look a little bit more elegant in the process, so not as brutal as some of those other samurais that we've seen from the past. 3-link bracelet. And another point that I'd bring up here when it comes to having this tool approach is the knurling on the crown, which is going to be very easy to unscrew and also adjust the time and get a handle of, even if, say, you had gloves on or something of that sort. Now we're moving to the next step up, looking at a compressor style watch from Longines. This is going to be the Longines Legend Diver at 39 millimeters. So Legend Diver, I think people forget, despite these looking more as a dress style watch nowadays, at least from the diver category, these are watches with legitimate history. So if you look back, 1959, the 7042 debuted for the brand as one of their iconic dive watches and having this dual crown layout. So why these were designed? So the originals were true compressor cases where the case back would compress into the ceiling on the back to allow it to withstand the pressure as it would go deeper underwater. But also the other benefit to these style of cases back in the day and even today is going to be the elapsed time and how it's going to be positioned. So instead of having the external bezel on the outside, it's internal. And what this would allow is you to track that elapsed time without the fear of it getting knocked. So you actually have to unscrew one of the crowns to be able to rotate that elapsed time. The modern rebirth of the Legend Diver was brought forth in 2007. And just keep in mind, this is way before the vintage revival craze of dive watches. Way before. This is 5 years before the Tudor Black Bay was a thing. This is right at the beginning where we started to see this craze. And then on the inside, you have the L888.6 caliber. So what you get with this caliber is going to be a COSC certification, 68 hours of power reserve approximately, and this is going to 10x the standard of the ISO 764 for magnetism. So you're getting great performance on that front, and then also going to be compliant to the ISO 6425 standard for a dive watch. And then for the reach pick under the dive category, now some people might get mad at me, and this is going to get into this whole question, an almost philosophical question of, is this still a tool watch? And I think it depends. Now we're looking at this high reach goal, and if you looked at people in the field of professional diving, I would argue that the Rolex Submariner still to this day is a watch that it is an aspirational piece, and people, if they can and have the funds to support it, would still do it in a dive with these watches. So I'm gonna put the Rolex Submariner Date as the top pick here. Now you're getting just over $10,000 for the Date version. If you're looking at the Submariner, that's going to be just over $9,000. In 2020, they shifted the diameter to 41 millimeters, 12.5 millimeters in thickness, and a lug to lug of 48.1 millimeters. So wearing relatively true to size, but I would say these wear smaller, closer to a 40 millimeter case on wrist, 300 meters of water resistance, superlative chronometer, -2 to +2 seconds a day. The lume for Rolex is fantastic. Cyclops magnification, going to be easier to read even underwater. Cerachrome bezel insert for added durability. And I know this idea of the Submariner as a tool watch could probably be debatable. I was struggling to think of the balance of, as you're spending more than $5,000 on a dive watch, if you did want to rationalize it, this was your budget, and you wanted to use it in its intended purpose, the Submariner was one of the first ones that come to mind. And factoring in that these have to still look the part, the whole concept of this video is it still needs to be able to be workable in the day-to-day. There probably isn't a dive watch that is more true to that than the Submariner, and being a watch that can look great in these professional environments, but also in an environment where maybe you have to dress up to some degree. It could simply be your one and only watch. So now we look at the air category. So mostly pilot's watches here. Some of the things that I am looking for has to be able to withstand different knocks, highly legible. You want to maybe have some orientation on the dial design. Lume is going to be necessary. Accuracy would also be nice. And if we can get low pressure resistant, that even adds to the proposition here. What I'm also factoring in is there's a lot of pilot's watches that tend to have a lot of information on the dial. So I do not want to go that route. So Breitling Navitimer, as cool as it is, I don't think it's going to be appropriate here, because there might be circumstances where that watch might not land in the same way as some of the watches chosen here. So that's what I'm also trying to weigh out and balance as I look at these recommendations. Now, under $1,000, going back and forth, there's a lot of pilot's watches, but my challenge here was, let's try to get something that can look the part, but also sustain this idea of tool watches, be wearable, and factor in all of the points of criteria that I mentioned. And for the pick here, we're gonna look at the Hamilton Khaki Aviation Pilot Automatic at 39 millimeters. So this is actually a new case for this model family. 39 millimeters is going to split the difference of some of the other options that you had in this collection previously. 11.6 millimeters in thickness. Lug to lug is going to be pretty wearable for that dimension set, and water resistance of 100 meters while getting the H10 movement on the inside, 80 hours of power reserve, C07.611 base caliber there. Sapphire crystal as well. I would argue that Hamilton, compared to some of the other brands on this list, there might be some more reflection that you might see, but the high contrast on the dial is certainly going to help there. Why this was one that come to mind is it takes the Khaki DNA, but then also is going to shift it into more of the aviation theme. You have larger surface area for the hands as well as the markers on the dial for lume. The orientation triangle is there at 12. The water resistance is going to be elevated compared to some of the other Khaki models. You have the larger minute display on the outside for easy viewing at a quick moment. So this is following more of that Type B dial configuration. Another point I like about these watches is the partial hollowing out of those central hands for visibility of the central hour. So you can actually peek through and still see that inner hour ring even through those hands, which I think is a nice touch. With that C07.611 caliber on the inside, you are getting a Nivachron balance spring. So Nivachron is a proprietary material produced by the Swatch Group. It's gonna help with resistance against shocks and temperature changes, which is very helpful when dealing with flight way above the Earth's surface. Now we look at the $1,000 to $4,000 category, and this is a watch that I have currently on my wrist right now. We're looking at the Sinn 104. So you could basically pick whatever model you'd like here. I would say the black dial as well as the white dial would be maybe the better choices when it comes to legibility. So you have just over $2,000, but just over $2,000, what you're getting now is the updated clasp on the H-Link bracelet from Sinn, which is long overdue, but very well executed. So the weight was worth it. 41 millimeter diameter, but does not wear anywhere near that. This is actually more compact on that lug-to-lug length than a Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical at 38 millimeters. And this is a 41 millimeter diameter watch. You're getting 200 meters of water resistance in a watch that is more geared towards pilots and following that design. So don't be fooled by having that external bezel. It's actually a countdown bezel, not a time elapse bezel. So you're going that route rather than the dive watch route, but still getting dive watch levels of water resistance in the process. Anecdotally too, Sinn have some of the best regulation in the business. They don't truly quote anything when it comes to their product pages and what they're saying that these watches are going to be able to run at, but I find that we're talking a few seconds, well within COSC parameters in most of the instances that I have seen Sinn watches in. That's not something that they will quote, it's just something that I have seen with trying on and wearing many of their watches over the years. The new bracelet is simply phenomenal. You're getting on-the-fly adjustment. It's probably one of the best on-the-fly adjustment systems that I have seen for the price in the industry. Not quite to the level of T-Fit, but you're coming at well under $1,000 before you start to get into the T-Fit from Tudor anyway. A couple other things to consider as maybe you're in flight. One would be the fact that these are going to be low pressure resistant. You are also going to have screwing in of the bezel, so the outside notching on that bezel, that piece is going to be screwed in. So if it did take a hard knock, it's going to not have the bezel come off, which can happen with certain watches in certain situations. And then the dial itself, high contrast, the lume is quite solid. And then Sinn, along with what I mentioned earlier about Omega, the double AR on these watches, simply fantastic. Now we get to the high category of the aviation or air theme here. I'm trying to find the balance of not having too much information on a dial, still being versatile enough, while also being suitable for the job. And for that, we're looking at the IWC Mark XX. So the Mark series goes all the way back to the 1930s. The Mark XX was just recently updated in the last couple of years, being the follow-up to the Mark 18. They skip 19, they go straight to 20. And what you get with the new Mark XX is a few things. One is going to be the water resistance rating. The previous Mark 18 had 60 meters of water resistance, which IWC is pretty good about having a water resistance rating that's going to be pretty true to what you can expect. So I would imagine at 60 meters, you could feel pretty good about getting that watch wet, no problem at all. 100 meters though, even more peace of mind in that regard. Also, the lug-to-lug dimension on these watches is going to be more compact compared to the Mark 18, which had very long lugs. This still does have that longer silhouette, but is going to be 49 millimeters lug-to-lug, wearing a bit more true to size. 10.8 millimeters in thickness, but the other upgrade for these watches is going to be the movement on the inside. This is the 32111 from IWC, 5 days of power reserve, so 120 hours of power reserve for these watches. A couple other things that I like is if you go for the bracelet option, very comfortable, and then the on-the-fly adjustment adjustment in that bracelet and that clasp is very slick. You have a button within the logo on the backside of that clasp, which is very easy, and one of the most nifty ways to integrate that function into a bracelet I've seen across the industry. And now we have the land category. So this is where you're looking for that explorer watch, that adventurer watch, and something that you're going to wear when you're in the field. You could be in harsh conditions, potentially navigating austere terrain. Water resistance is going to be helpful, so this watch could be submerged. Lume is also going to be a must. You want high contrast with the dial. Comfortable as well. I think we want comfort because we don't know what environment we are dealing with. It can't be too heavy. We're not looking for something overly bulky, so we want to find balance there. Navigational aspects like compass bezels, things of that sort might be nice. Sapphire glass. And also one other thing I throw out here for this one specifically, because when you're in the field, like a land or adventure watch, you don't necessarily know what's going to be the environment or the call to action for that day. So you want something that's viable with different straps. It might not be available in all the different types of straps, but having the flexibility to change it out for specific use cases will be nice. Now under $1,000, this was probably one of the easier ones to consider. I'm gonna go with the Seiko Alpinist SPB121. Some might argue that there's not enough contrast here. This is a little bit of a weird watch. Why would we pick this one? But to me, this is an adventurer, explorer style watch under $1,000 with some features that allow it to separate from some of the competition here. And I think one of the points is a compass bezel. Is it slightly useless? Yes, for most, but for this specific circumstance, when we're talking about a tool watch, I think this could be a helpful feature if some of your kit was, unfortunately, your electronic kit that was not able to work and was failing. You do not need a compass bezel in order to be able to navigate with a mechanical watch, but it is still making it a bit easier and makes it more fun in the process. 200 meters of water resistance is also going to be a huge aspect of these watches that I think make them more appropriate to give as a recommendation. 46.4 millimeter lug to lug, 39.5 millimeters for that diameter, and a little bit high on the cases at 13.2 millimeters, but still very reasonable for 200 meters of water resistance watch. 6R35 movements, that's the 70-hour power reserve, 21.6 beat rate, 3 hertz movement. You also in the 1950s had the Seiko Laurel Alpinists, where these are going to probably more directly pull their inspiration. But where they're finding the most inspiration is the SARB 017. This was a piece that was beloved by so many. It's a JDM model, and then in 2020, after the discontinuation of the SARB 017, they brought it back with the SPB121. So you're getting that internal compass bezel, additional crown, 200 meters, fantastic lume. And another thing I'll bring up is these watches can be very useful and can be swapped with many different straps and look the part and feel great on the wrist in the process. Then we move to the medium category. I'm going to follow more of this explorer style. The one that's obvious to me is going to be the Tudor Ranger. The Tudor Ranger was brought back in 2022 and updated the 2014 Heritage Ranger with a few different points. Now, the most important point was going to be the caliber on the inside. You're getting an MT caliber, the MT5042. That's a 70-hour power reserve movement. It's going to be COSC certified, sapphire crystal to go along with these, 100 meters of water resistance, and then a 39 millimeter diameter case with a thickness of 12 millimeters and a lug to lug of 47 millimeters. So these basically wear, imagine if you took a Black Bay 58, took off the external rotating bezel and created more of a field style watch. That would be the best representation or summation of how I would say how these wear. You're getting a completely printed dial. You are getting lume on that dial as well, but also T-fit. So the comfort in the field, if you're swelling in the field, to have that available to you will be nice. You do have additional strap options, which Tudor is going to offer up as well for these configurations. If you're looking at a bracelet version, you're gonna be well over $3,000, but on a strap version, you're right in that range around $3,000. So this is right at the entry point of where you're going to be able to get into an MT caliber from Tudor. And then for the final watch, this one, I'm sorry guys, this has to be the pick here, very similar to the Submariner, but now we have the Rolex Explorer, 36 millimeters. This is the 124-270. So Rolex has had this weird back and forth over the last 10 to 15 years with the Explorer, where they've gone 36 millimeters to 39 millimeters, back to 36 millimeters, and then adding an additional 40 millimeters. So we could mention the 224-270 here as well, but I'm gonna look at the purest form, the 36 millimeter Rolex Explorer in a modern package. What you're getting at retail price for these, and also keeping in mind that these are watches that you can get a little more easily at retail compared to most Rolexes. The secondary trading market values for the Explorer 36 millimeter is gonna be close to the retail price. I know people like to bring up the fact that it's impossible to get Rolexes, but that's not as much of the case for the Rolex Explorer. 36 millimeters for that diameter, 11.5 millimeters in thickness, lug to lug of 43.1 millimeters, getting 100 meters of water resistance with that Oyster case. On the inside is the Rolex 3230 with that extended power reserve now, sapphire crystal, 369 dial configuration, very comfortable bracelet, solid lume, legibility is there, and maybe one of the most versatile watches in the history of watchmaking, honestly. Whether you're changing straps, you're wearing it with the bracelet, it doesn't matter. Whether you're wearing it in the field, wearing it in an office environment, it simply does not matter. The Rolex Explorer is maybe the perfect representation of a single watch collection while still being capable in the process. But all right, guys, that's my video here today, looking at some tool watches that can do the job, but also look the part in a variety of different circumstances. Do you agree with my picks? Do you not agree with my picks? Are there other watches that you would consider for some of these categories? Leave some comments down below, but also if you enjoyed the video, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Really do appreciate that. That does help out the channel. I don't just say that. So thank you very much for all of you that do that. Also, if you have a story about maybe using a watch in a professional environment, or you're somebody that actually does use your watch in a day-to-day for a specific task or maybe for your profession, love to hear that as well in the comments down below. Also check out TeddyBaldessar.com. TeddyBaldessar.com is an authorized dealer for over 30 brands. Every purchase from TeddyBaldessar.com comes with full factory warranty, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support. And if you have any questions about the watches that we have on our website, feel free to reach out to our team on live chat on the website. We're there 18 hours a day, so feel free to reach out to us. And also how we're able to produce all this content is through selling watches. So if you are in the market for a watch, we'd absolutely love to have your business. Allow us to keep doing what we're doing here. We love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.